Well, as a libertarian, I think a just society is one where the government has a very, very small role in trying to regulate things and has a very hands-off role. And a just society is one where people have the most freedom and can operate however they want to, as long as they do not impinge on the freedom of others and as long as they don't cause harm to others with the word harm construed narrowly. So if I am able to pursue my life with the job that I have, and if I don't like that job, I can quit and go to another job to earn a living, and everyone else in society can choose their jobs and make a living the way they want to and have a family and go to church and have freedom of speech, then to me that promotes the most just society because it rewards people for the risks that they take and the consequences of their actions.
So in my opinion, a just society is that gives everyone equal opportunities, but also gives everyone what they deserve. So to kind of expand on that, equal opportunities would mean that everyone has access to being either at the top of the ladder, middle of the ladder, whatever they choose, kind of the quintessential American dream. But also that everyone gets their just desserts, basically, for what they do. So in other words, you can't get to the top of the ladder by cheating people. If that happens, you go to prison. Or you can't get what you want by killing someone.
It's true that libertarians view life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness and property as ironclad what we're about. But I own my life, and as a citizen, I own my body and my life. And if I have some disease, or if I am tired of living and want to end my life, I should have the absolute right to end it. And if I'm in my right mind, and if I'm mentally stable and am not under the influence of drugs or disease, I should be able to hire a physician to assist me with ending my life.
You have incidences where people are in so much pain and they want to die. But ultimately it comes back to, it's kind of, even think it's a Western value of that life is precious and that you should preserve life, kind of sort of at all costs. Yes, you run into the issue that people are not going to be able to do what they want. But the end issue is that a life is being taken prematurely. Whether by the patient or by the doctor, and I think that ultimately that is wrong, because it doesn't just hurt the person who is dying. There's family members involved, there's legal issue involved, there's precedent involved too, because once some people start doing this, and that means that other people will want to start being involved with active euthanasia, which can affect children. It can affect people who don't want to fight any longer through diseases. It can affect families. When you take a stance where you look at the end result rather than the action that's taken, you realize that there are a lot of different things involved. You have doctors who realize that there's something that if a patient wants to ask them to kill them, the doctors might have to comply, which is going to be breaking a lot of doctors' moral codes. And then is a doctor going to get sued if they're not willing to perform euthanasia? You have the issues of what if someone is coercing someone to die so that they can get their money, which is probably going to be a problem. You have the issues of families who don't want, say, a grandparent to die before they're supposed to, which you'd expect from a consequentialist view, that it's not okay because the end goal is not okay. It is wrong to take a life before the life should be taken. So, and that basically that all life is valuable no matter what stage the life is in. So the end result of euthanasia is that someone's dying, not how like nature would intend for them to die, is that they're dying prematurely.
Okay.
And that end goal is more important than the original action of does someone get what they want.
I would want to make sure that the person whose life we're talking about is clear-minded. I think there would be times where relatives of that person who stand to inherit wealth might be incentivized to encourage physician-assisted suicide, and so it would be up to a legal entity, even the government, to make sure that the person has given consent with a clear mind, either at the time or in a written way beforehand, and did not make any judgments under the influence of drugs that are mood altering or mind altering, or or disease of that kind as well, or mental impairments.
I think there need to be very strict guidelines, like I was mentioning earlier, because otherwise you have people saying, well, I'm in pain, but it's not terminal. So I think that you would have to have, and I'm not a medical doctor, but you'd have to have several doctors who would give consensus that this is terminal. You would have to have gone through several types of treatment. I think there would have to be demonstrated acute or very much pain that the person is in, very much chronic pain. I also think that the family would have to be willing. That you'd also probably have to have lawyers on board to make sure that the person is not being coerced into saying that they want to die, that you don't have, especially if you have money involved in the will and things like that. So I don't just think you have to address it from a medical perspective. I think there are probably legal issues that are going to go on with it as well.
Well, I think it becomes more and more problematic if the person whose life we're talking about has not given explicit consent. So in the situations you described, the one that's the easiest is if a person is able to say, that's what I want. If a person is unable to make that clear, either through a written document prepared beforehand or in some other way, then it becomes problematic, and that should be clarified before any action is taken.
So I would say, obviously, the worst kind would be non-voluntary, because I think that's not even technically even euthanasia. It should be murder if you have someone who is actively resisting, say, you stopping treatment and you stop treatment, then that's wrong. I actually don't really know how much of a moral difference there is, because it's still the standpoint of you're saying that someone's life at some point no longer has value. So that can actively, and the problem even with active euthanasia, where you actively say that you want to be killed because they're different gradients. So now in Europe you have 12-year-old children who are saying, I don't want to live anymore. So, and then the question becomes, how do you define pain? Because people have different standards of pain. So is it just cancer? Does it move from cancer? Does it move to short-term treatment? Does it move after a car wreck? You don't want to have to go through surgery in the recovery period. So I think that that gradient becomes, there's so much gray in there that I would still say that active desire for euthanasia kind of is a slippery slope. So I'd still say that would have moral implications that are not good. As to passive euthanasia, I think that it's an example of doctors not taking the Hippocratic Oath seriously. That you should take care of all patients.
I believe that the state has the right and the responsibility to look out for minors, and we might argue on when a person moves from being a minor to an adult, but a toddler would be a person who cannot articulate for him or herself, in my opinion, the willingness or the consent to have life taken away. So that would be very problematic. I don't believe off the cuff that I would promote laws that allow a third party, a parent or a guardian, to say, I'm ready for this toddler's life to end. I don't think that's the way we would go.
I think it kind of goes back to, from a consequentialist standpoint, you take an action based on is the end result good or bad. And I say the end result of an infant dying, especially when they don't have a say in it, is bad. The problem is what muddies our view is that right now parents have to pay for things like that. Parents have to pay to take care of an infant. They have to take off work. Maybe one of the parent has to be a full-time stay-at-home parent, and they have to downgrade their style of life to be able to take care of their parent, which is what our society sees as, oh, we're helping the parents long-term because they don't have to do those things. I would say that my decision that is actually not a good thing comes out of once again, first, my long-term view that taking a life, even if just passively, is bad. But second of all, like in an ideal society, there would be safety nets so that parents would not be responsible for, say, a terminally ill child who has 2 years to live, which is going to completely drain all of their savings. So that in that instance, you would have some sort of backup so that the parents would not be responsible. Which I think would do away with a lot of the concerns about whether or not parents would be responsible for the child, which puts the spotlight back on whether or not you should take a life prematurely.
There would be financial incentives for family members. There would also be financial incentives for insurance companies to say, it's a lot cheaper for you to kill yourself than for us to continue treating you, which would mean that the standard of mental clarity would have to be pretty high among the people who make that judgment of mental clarity. We would have to have a pretty high standard for people to say, this person has passed the threshold of mental clarity.
An argument for euthanasia is that you are helping take care of people who are more healthier. But I think once again that you're assigning different quality of life to different lives, and that in my opinion all type of lives deserve equal amount of care. So my dad's a doctor, and I know that surgeons, the majority of their surgeries are performed on elderly people. And the question is that taking away from younger people? Once again, I would say that you have to view all life as equal. So that I would say that ultimately that's like almost even worse, because at what point does freeing up beds become freeing up beds for people with more money, freeing up beds for people with more connection, instead of freeing up beds for younger people or healthy people?